Ethan Carter was an unsuspecting homeowner, deeply invested in the quiet life of Maple Ridge. He cherished his privacy and the sense of community among his neighbors. For him, home was a sanctuary where he could unwind after a long day. However, that tranquility came crashing down one fateful afternoon when he returned home to find his carefully maintained privacy hedges brutally destroyed. To make matters worse, a $750 fine was taped to his front door. Confusion quickly turned to anger as Ethan realized this was not just a random act. It was a direct assault from the Maple Ridge HOA, led by the unyielding Samantha Langford. Samantha had targeted Ethan before, but this time she had crossed a line he couldn't ignore. Little did she know, Ethan had recently been hired as the HOA's financial auditor. With access to 5 years of financial records, he was armed with the means to uncover the secrets that Samantha desperately wanted to keep buried. As he delved into the books, Ethan quickly identified troubling patterns, corruption woven into the fabric of the HOA's operations. He discovered that the landscaping company responsible for cutting down his hedges was owned by Samantha's brother-in-law and had exorbitantly overcharged for their services. Additionally, thousands of dollars in beautification fees were being funneled into personal accounts rather than benefiting the community. Even more alarming was the selective enforcement of HOA violations against those who dared to challenge Samantha's authority. Fueled by determination and a sense of justice, Ethan decided to expose these findings at a public HOA meeting. He prepared himself for pushback, knowing Samantha would not take kindly to being confronted. When he presented solid proof, emails and payment records illustrating a clear pattern of fraud, Samantha attempted to silence him, even trying to fire him on the spot. But Ethan was no longer just a victim. He had become a whistleblower ready to fight back against corruption in his community. With unwavering support from fellow homeowners, he initiated a forensic audit that would change everything in Maple Ridge. The Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, or HOA, was known for its strict enforcement of community rules and regulations. At the helm was Samantha Langford, a formidable presence who ruled with an iron fist. Her reputation as a ruthless leader preceded her. She thrived on maintaining control and exerting her authority over the residents. Samantha had a history of targeting those who dared to question her decisions, and Ethan Carter had unfortunately found himself on her radar more than once. Ethan's encounters with the HOA were marked by tension and confrontation. He had witnessed firsthand how Samantha wielded power to intimidate homeowners, often issuing fines for minor infractions while turning a blind eye to more significant issues within the community. Her selective enforcement created an atmosphere of fear, silencing dissent and consolidating her control over Maple Ridge. This time, however, things were different. As Ethan returned home to find his privacy hedges destroyed and a $750 fine affixed to his door, he felt the stakes shift dramatically. The destruction of his property was not just an isolated incident. It was part of Samantha's broader pattern of oppression against those who opposed her rule. Little did she know that her latest attack would awaken a force she never anticipated. Ethan had recently been appointed as the HOA's financial auditor. With access to 5 years of financial records, Ethan was poised to uncover the truth about the HOA's dealings. He began to suspect that Samantha's ruthless tactics extended beyond mere intimidation. They were intertwined with corruption and fraud. It was clear that Samantha had cultivated an environment where favoritism flourished and financial misconduct thrived, particularly benefiting her close associates. As Ethan dug deeper into the financial documents, he realized the true extent of the corruption at play, a chilling revelation that would set him firmly on a collision course with Samantha. The stakes were no longer just personal. They involved the integrity of the entire community. With each new discovery, Ethan became more determined to stand up against Samantha's tyranny, ready to expose the dark secrets hidden behind Maple Ridge's pristine facade. Ethan Carter's recent appointment as the financial auditor for the Maple Ridge HOA seemed like a fresh start, a chance to contribute positively to his community. Little did he know how pivotal this role would become in the battle against corruption. With access to 5 years' worth of financial records, Ethan found himself in a unique position, one that would allow him to peer behind the curtain of the HOA and uncover the truth lurking within its financial dealings. As he began his investigation, Ethan approached the records with a mixture of trepidation and determination. He meticulously examined each line item, looking for discrepancies and signs of mismanagement. What started as a routine audit quickly transformed into a deep dive into a web of deceit that had been carefully woven by Samantha Langford and her allies. The more he dug, the clearer it became that Samantha's iron grip on the HOA was not just about enforcing rules. It was about exploiting power for personal gain. Ethan discovered alarming patterns, including inflated invoices from contractors and suspicious fees labeled as beautification charges. One particular revelation hit close to home. The landscaping company responsible for cutting down his hedges was owned by none other than Samantha's brother-in-law. This conflict of interest raised serious questions about the integrity of the HOA's financial practices and revealed how deeply nepotism had infiltrated their operations. His findings painted a picture of systematic corruption, where funds meant for community improvement were instead funneled into personal accounts, leaving residents in the dark about the true state of their finances. Ethan realized that not only had he stumbled upon evidence of fraud, but that he also held the keys to potentially dismantling Samantha's reign. Determined to act, Ethan prepared to present his findings at the upcoming public HOA meeting. He understood that this would be a defining moment, not just for him, but for all homeowners who had suffered under Samantha's rule. Armed with solid proof and fueled by a newfound sense of purpose, Ethan was ready to confront the very system designed to protect them, setting the stage for a confrontation that would change everything in Maple Ridge. As Ethan delved deeper into the financial records of the Maple Ridge HOA, a troubling pattern of corruption began to emerge. What he initially thought would be a straightforward audit quickly transformed into a revelation of systemic mismanagement and deceit. The more he examined the numbers, the clearer it became that Samantha Langford had created an environment where nepotism thrived and funds were misappropriated with alarming regularity. One of the most glaring instances of corruption involved the landscaping company that had overcharged Ethan for cutting down his hedges. To his shock, he discovered that this company was owned by Samantha's brother-in-law. This blatant conflict of interest raised serious ethical questions about how contracts were awarded and who truly benefited from the HOA's expenditures. It was evident that favoritism influenced decisions, leaving residents vulnerable to exploitation while enriching those close to Samantha. Ethan's investigation didn't stop there. He uncovered thousands of dollars in fees categorized as beautification charges, which were supposed to enhance the community, but instead seemed to vanish into thin air. As he traced the flow of these funds, it became apparent that they were funneled into personal accounts rather than being used for their intended purpose. The lack of transparency in these transactions further highlighted the depth of the corruption within the HOA. Selective enforcement of HOA violations was another aspect of Samantha's regime that Ethan found deeply troubling. Homeowners who dared to question her authority were often met with costly fines and punitive actions, while those in Samantha's inner circle faced no repercussions for their infractions. This double standard created an atmosphere of fear among residents, silencing dissent and ensuring that Samantha maintained control. Armed with compelling evidence, Ethan felt a surge of determination. He knew he had stumbled upon something monumental, proof of a corrupt system undermining the very foundation of their community. With each finding, his resolve strengthened. He was no longer just a victim, but a whistleblower prepared to expose the truth at any cost. As he prepared to confront Samantha at the upcoming HOA meeting, Ethan understood that this confrontation could either pave the way for justice or seal his fate in her regime. As Ethan continued his investigation into the Maple Ridge HOA, he stumbled upon another disturbing element of Samantha Langford's reign: the selective enforcement of HOA violations. This tactic was not just a tool for maintaining order. It was a weapon used to silence dissent and intimidate homeowners who dared to challenge her authority. Ethan learned that while Samantha wielded her power to issue fines and penalties at will, those within her inner circle were often exempt from scrutiny. Neighbors who questioned the board's decisions or brought up concerns about financial mismanagement found themselves on the receiving end of harsh penalties for minor infractions. A homeowner who dared to paint their door an unconventional color might receive a warning, while a member of Samantha's family could make significant alterations without consequence. The oppressive tactics employed by Samantha and her board fostered an atmosphere of fear, where residents felt compelled to keep quiet or risk facing unwarranted fines or harassment. Ethan spoke with fellow homeowners who recounted stories of intimidation and retribution. Many had been subjected to unfounded complaints or excessive scrutiny, driving them to frustration and despair. The community that was supposed to be united under shared goals had become fractured, with neighbors turning against one another in a desperate attempt to survive under the board's oppressive regime. Ethan recognized that this atmosphere of fear was not merely collateral damage, it was a calculated strategy. By enforcing rules selectively, Samantha maintained control over the community, ensuring that only those who posed a threat to her power faced any repercussions. This manipulation created divisions, sowing distrust among residents and preventing them from banding together against her. Determined to expose this injustice, Ethan understood that addressing the selective enforcement of violations would be crucial in his upcoming confrontation at the public HOA meeting. He knew that revealing these tactics would not only shed light on Samantha's corrupt practices, but also empower the homeowners who had suffered in silence for far too long. As he prepared his evidence, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to dismantle the oppressive tactics that had plagued Maple Ridge and restore fairness and accountability to their community. As the day of the public HOA meeting approached, Ethan felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He had gathered irrefutable evidence of corruption within the Maple Ridge HOA, but confronting Samantha Langford and her board was a daunting task. Yet deep down, he understood that this moment would define not only his future but also the future of his community. When the meeting commenced, Ethan's heart raced as he stepped up to the podium. The room was filled with residents, some curious, others wary. He took a deep breath and began to present his findings, emails, payment records, and detailed accounts of financial misconduct. With each piece of evidence he unveiled, he could see the shock and disbelief washing over his neighbors' faces. However, as Ethan spoke, Samantha's demeanor shifted from composed to furious. She attempted to interrupt him, insisting that he was spreading lies. When that didn't work, she threatened to have him removed from the meeting. "You're out of line, Ethan," she shouted, her voice laced with desperation. But he stood firm, knowing that silence would mean accepting defeat. In that moment, Ethan transformed from a victim of Samantha's oppressive regime into a courageous whistleblower determined to expose the truth. His heart pounded as he pressed on, detailing how the HOA had misappropriated funds, over $400,000 worth, and discussed the selective enforcement of violations against dissenters like himself. The tension in the room was palpable as more homeowners began to grasp the severity of the situation. Despite Samantha's attempts to silence him, Ethan's resolve only grew stronger. He could feel support building among his neighbors. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Fueled by their encouragement, he pushed forward with his presentation. "We deserve transparency, we deserve accountability," he declared passionately. With each word, Ethan not only fought for his own justice but also for every homeowner who had been wronged under Samantha's rule. This pivotal moment marked a turning point in their fight against corruption. No longer would they be silenced or intimidated. As he concluded his presentation, Ethan knew he had sparked something significant among his fellow residents. The courage to stand up against oppression had ignited a fire within Maple Ridge, a fire that would prove unstoppable in their quest for justice. As Ethan stood before the gathered homeowners at the HOA meeting, he could feel the weight of their collective gaze on him. With determination coursing through him, he presented the solid proof he had meticulously gathered: emails, payment records, and evidence of fraudulent transactions that highlighted the depth of corruption within the Maple Ridge HOA. He began by displaying emails that showcased collusion between Samantha Langford and her associates, revealing how they had orchestrated a scheme to divert funds meant for community improvements into their personal accounts. The room was silent as Ethan detailed the overcharging by the landscaping company owned by Samantha's brother-in-law, emphasizing how these inflated costs were justified by false claims of necessary services. It's funny how things work out, just like how subscribing to this channel seems to uncover hidden secrets. But back to Ethan's deep dive into the HOA's dirty dealings. With each piece of evidence he laid out, murmurs of disbelief rippled through the audience. Homeowners who had previously felt powerless began to see the truth behind the facade of authority that Samantha had maintained for so long. Ethan pointed to payment records that illustrated thousands of dollars labeled as beautification fees, but had been funneled away from any actual community benefit. The realization that they had been misled and exploited fueled a growing sense of outrage among his neighbors. Ethan's voice grew stronger as he recounted stories of selective enforcement against those who dared to question the board's actions. He highlighted specific cases where homeowners received hefty fines for minor infractions while others walked away unscathed. As he spoke, Ethan could see empathy and anger in the faces around him, it was clear they were ready to support him. The turning point came when he concluded his presentation with a call to action. We cannot allow this to continue. It's time to demand a forensic audit to uncover the truth about our finances. The room erupted with applause and shouts of agreement, a chorus of voices unified in their desire for justice. Energized by Ethan's revelations, fellow homeowners rallied together, insisting on a forensic audit to investigate the misappropriated funds. This collective demand marked a pivotal moment in their battle against corruption, rallying the community around a common cause. They could no longer stand idly by. They were ready to fight back against the oppressive tactics that had plagued Maple Ridge for far too long. Ethan felt a surge of hope as he witnessed this transformation. What began as his solitary struggle was now blossoming into a powerful movement for change. The moment the forensic audit results were presented, the atmosphere in the Maple Ridge community shifted dramatically. Ethan Carter sat at the meeting, anxiously awaiting the findings that would either validate his concerns or cast doubt on his efforts. When the auditor finally spoke, the numbers revealed were staggering. Over $400,000 had been misappropriated. Gasps filled the room as homeowners processed the magnitude of the financial misconduct that had been hiding in plain sight. This revelation marked a significant turning point in the conflict between Ethan and Samantha Langford. The stakes had escalated beyond personal grievances. They were now confronting a substantial betrayal that affected every resident in Maple Ridge. As Ethan listened to the details of how funds meant for community services had been diverted for personal gain, he felt a mix of vindication and determination. The evidence backed everything he had fought to expose. For Samantha, the audit results were a devastating blow. Her facade of control began to crumble as panic set in. The very authority she wielded so ruthlessly was now under scrutiny, and she could no longer dismiss Ethan's claims as mere complaints from a disgruntled homeowner. The reality of her actions threatened not just her position, but also her freedom. Fearing the consequences, she became increasingly desperate, resorting to intimidation tactics to maintain control over her board members and silence any dissenters. Ethan's findings galvanized support among homeowners who had once felt powerless under Samantha's reign. They rallied together, demanding accountability and justice. With public sentiment now firmly behind him, Ethan knew they had crossed a threshold. Their fight was no longer just about one man against a tyrant, it was a united front against corruption. As media coverage of the scandal intensified, Ethan found himself at the center of a growing movement for transparency and reform within their community. With every story published, public pressure mounted on Samantha and her board members. It became clear that their time was running out. In the weeks that followed, law enforcement took notice, leading to arrests for embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct against Samantha and 3 other board members. For Ethan, this was not just a personal victory, it was a collective triumph for all homeowners who had endured years of oppression. The fight was far from over, but with each step forward, they were dismantling the corrupt system that had plagued Maple Ridge for far too long. As the forensic audit revealed the extent of the misappropriated funds, Samantha Langford's desperation reached alarming heights. The pressure was mounting, and her once-iron grip on the Maple Ridge HOA was beginning to slip. Rather than accept the consequences of her actions, she resorted to increasingly brazen intimidation tactics in a futile attempt to maintain control. One of Samantha's most outrageous schemes involved calling in fake emergency work crews to tear up Ethan's front yard. Under the guise of urgent repairs, these crews created chaos, making it clear that she would stop at nothing to intimidate him and the other homeowners. It was a calculated move designed to send a message. Anyone who dared challenge her authority would face repercussions. As Ethan watched his front yard being ripped apart, he felt a mix of anger and resolve. This was not just an attack on his property, but an assault on the entire community's fight for justice. Samantha's tactics didn't end there. In her escalating panic, she began threatening board members who had shown support for Ethan. She made it clear that loyalty to her was paramount, and any dissent would not be tolerated. Board members were coerced into silence, fearful of losing their positions or facing personal repercussions if they spoke out against her. This atmosphere of fear stifled open dialogue within the HOA and highlighted how deeply entrenched Samantha's authoritarian rule had become. To further consolidate her power, Samantha hired private security to intimidate homeowners who attended meetings or expressed dissenting opinions. These security guards patrolled the neighborhood as if it were a war zone, creating an environment where residents felt unsafe and silenced. The community that once thrived on neighborly trust was now fractured by fear and suspicion. But while Samantha attempted to control the narrative through intimidation, Ethan remained undeterred. He knew that her desperate measures were a sign of weakness, a last-ditch effort from a leader losing her grip on power. With each act of intimidation, he found renewed determination to see this fight through to the end. As the media began covering the unfolding scandal, more homeowners stepped forward to share their stories of intimidation and manipulation under Samantha's rule. The tide was turning. People were no longer afraid to stand together against her oppressive tactics. The Maple Ridge community was beginning to unite in their quest for justice, ready to dismantle the corrupt system that had held them captive for far too long. As the scandal surrounding the Maple Ridge HOA unfolded, media coverage rapidly escalated, transforming Ethan Carter's fight against corruption into a public spectacle. Local news outlets began to take notice of the shocking revelations, and their cameras turned toward Maple Ridge. Stories of embezzlement, fraud, and intimidation painted a vivid picture of the oppressive regime under Samantha Langford's leadership. This media spotlight became a powerful catalyst for change. Ethan's findings, once confined to the walls of a community meeting, now reached a broader audience. The public was captivated by the depth of corruption within the HOA and the brave stand taken by a homeowner willing to expose it. As news articles circulated and television segments aired, more residents began to speak out about their own experiences with Samantha's bullying tactics and the arbitrary enforcement of rules. The community that had once felt isolated and powerless was now energized by a shared sense of purpose. With each broadcast and publication, pressure mounted on the HOA to respond. Homeowners who had previously remained silent found their voices, emboldened by the growing support from their neighbors and the attention from local media. The tide was turning. It was no longer just Ethan against Samantha. It was an entire community demanding accountability. As media coverage intensified, so did calls for action. The public outcry prompted local authorities to initiate a full-scale legal investigation into the HOA's finances. Law enforcement began scrutinizing Samantha's actions more closely, and her grip on power became increasingly tenuous. She could no longer manipulate or intimidate those who sought justice. The eyes of the public were upon her. The culmination of this media frenzy came within weeks when Samantha and 3 other board members were arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct. The community erupted in applause. They had won a significant battle against corruption. The exposure of these scandals not only highlighted individual wrongdoing, but also catalyzed a demand for systemic change within the HOA. Ethan's role as a whistleblower had transformed him into a community hero, but he remained focused on what lay ahead. With newfound momentum, he joined forces with fellow homeowners to help rebuild trust within their neighborhood. Together, they worked towards ensuring transparency and fairness in leadership, a promise that Maple Ridge would never again fall prey to such abuses of power. In this way, the media coverage not only amplified Ethan's voice, but also ignited a movement that reshaped their community for the better. The culmination of Ethan Carter's relentless pursuit of justice came when legal actions were finally taken against Samantha Langford and 3 other board members of the Maple Ridge HOA. Following a thorough investigation prompted by Ethan's findings, law enforcement moved swiftly to address the extensive corruption that had plagued their community for far too long. The news of their arrest sent shockwaves through Maple Ridge, marking a significant victory not just for Ethan, but for the entire community. As images of Samantha and her cohorts being led away in handcuffs flashed across local news screens, residents felt a wave of relief wash over them. This was more than just a moment of personal vindication for Ethan. It symbolized a collective triumph against the tyranny that had stifled their voices and robbed them of their resources. Homeowners who had once lived in fear began to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They were no longer isolated victims, but part of a larger movement for accountability and reform. The charges of embezzlement, fraud, and misconduct detailed a shocking betrayal of trust, revealing how those in positions of power had exploited their roles for personal gain. The revelation that over $400,000 had been misappropriated laid bare the extent of the deceit, reinforcing the importance of Ethan's courageous stand against the oppressive regime. As details emerged during the legal proceedings, it became clear that this was not just an isolated incident. It was indicative of a systemic failure within the HOA that had allowed corruption to flourish unchecked. The community rallied around Ethan as a hero, recognizing his bravery in exposing the truth and fighting back against an entrenched power structure. With the arrest serving as a catalyst for change, homeowners began to envision a new future for Maple Ridge, one built on transparency and fairness rather than fear and manipulation. Together, they started to discuss what reforms were necessary to prevent such abuses from occurring again. Ethan took an active role in these discussions, helping to draft new policies aimed at ensuring accountability among HOA leadership. This pivotal moment set the stage for a new chapter in Maple Ridge's history. As residents celebrated their victory and began to rebuild trust within their community, they knew that the fight against corruption wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers. It was about creating a vibrant neighborhood where everyone's voice mattered. With Samantha's downfall, they believed they could finally flourish without fear or oppression. In the wake of the arrests of Samantha Langford and her cohorts, Ethan Carter took on a pivotal role in rebuilding the Maple Ridge HOA. With corruption now exposed and a renewed sense of hope sweeping through the community, it was clear that the old ways had to be left behind. Homeowners were eager for change, and Ethan was determined to lead the charge toward a more transparent and fair governance structure. Ethan understood that this was not just about filling leadership positions. It was about fostering a culture of accountability and participation among all residents. He worked closely with fellow homeowners to identify candidates who were committed to ethical practices and had a genuine interest in serving the community. Together, they formed a new board that represented diverse voices and perspectives, ensuring that every resident felt heard and valued. One of the first initiatives Ethan championed was establishing regular town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns and suggestions freely. These meetings became a cornerstone of the new HOA's approach, allowing homeowners to engage directly with board members. This open dialogue helped rebuild trust and encouraged a renewed sense of community participation that had been sorely lacking under Samantha's regime. Ethan also advocated for implementing clear policies regarding financial transparency. Homeowners now had access to detailed financial reports, allowing them to monitor expenditures and ensure funds were being used appropriately. He worked tirelessly to create an environment where residents could feel confident that their money was being spent for the benefit of the community rather than lining the pockets of corrupt officials. In addition to these structural changes, Ethan organized community events aimed at strengthening neighborhood bonds. From block parties to volunteer days focused on beautifying shared spaces, these activities fostered camaraderie among residents who had previously felt divided by fear and suspicion. As Maple Ridge began to flourish under this new leadership, former adversaries found common ground, united by a shared vision for their community's future. The sense of empowerment among homeowners grew stronger as they realized that their voices mattered in decision-making processes. Ethan's leadership demonstrated that change was possible when people came together with a commitment to fairness and integrity. The transformation of Maple Ridge from a place dominated by fear to one characterized by cooperation and collaboration became a beacon of hope for other neighborhoods facing similar challenges. In rebuilding the HOA, Ethan not only restored his own faith in the system, but also revitalized the community spirit that made Maple Ridge truly special. As Maple Ridge began to heal from the turmoil of the past, the restoration of community trust became a central focus for Ethan Carter and the new HOA leadership. With the corrupt policies that had once plagued their neighborhood being systematically reversed, residents felt a renewed sense of hope and ownership over their community. One of the first steps taken by the new board was to refund unfair fines that had been levied under Samantha Langford's administration. Many residents had faced unjust penalties for minor infractions or had been targeted simply for questioning her authority. The decision to refund these fines not only alleviated a financial burden for many families, but also symbolized a commitment to fairness and justice. Homeowners began to feel valued again, knowing that their concerns were finally being heard. The reversal of corrupt policies extended beyond financial matters. The new leadership worked diligently to establish clearer guidelines for HOA operations, ensuring that decisions would be made transparently and with input from all residents. Regular meetings encouraged open dialogue, allowing homeowners to voice their ideas and concerns. This change fostered an atmosphere where participation in HOA decisions became the norm rather than an afterthought. Ethan also played a vital role in facilitating workshops and information sessions aimed at educating residents about their rights within the HOA framework. Empowered with knowledge, homeowners were better equipped to engage in conversations about community issues and advocate for themselves and their neighbors. This newfound empowerment helped knit together a sense of camaraderie among residents, transforming Maple Ridge into a thriving community rather than just a collection of houses. As trust began to blossom, so did the community spirit. Neighbors who had once felt divided by fear started organizing events, community cleanup days, potlucks, and social gatherings, reinvigorating connections that had been strained during Samantha's reign. The streets buzzed with laughter and chatter as residents came together to celebrate their shared victories and dreams for the future. Ethan's fight against corruption had not only exposed wrongdoing, but had also sparked a movement toward accountability and unity within Maple Ridge. Residents now saw themselves as active participants in shaping their neighborhood, embracing the idea that they could impact change together. The transformation was profound. What was once a community fractured by fear became one characterized by collaboration, trust, and resilience. In this way, Ethan's journey evolved from personal struggle to collective triumph, showcasing how fighting for integrity can restore not just an organization, but also the very fabric of a community. Maple Ridge was no longer just a place on a map. It was a vibrant neighborhood where every voice mattered. In the aftermath of the scandal that rocked the Maple Ridge HOA, Ethan Carter's commitment to preventing future abuses of power became a focal point for the community's rebuilding efforts. Recognizing the need for robust protections against corruption, Ethan was invited to collaborate on drafting new fraud prevention laws tailored for homeowners associations. This initiative marked a significant step toward ensuring that no neighborhood would ever have to endure the same oppression they had faced under Samantha Langford's leadership. Ethan approached this task with a deep sense of responsibility, drawing on his experiences and the lessons learned throughout his journey. He gathered input from fellow residents, understanding that their voices were crucial in shaping policies that would protect them moving forward. Community meetings were held where homeowners could share their concerns and suggestions. This inclusive approach not only fostered a sense of ownership among residents, but also ensured that the proposed laws would address real issues affecting their lives. Together with a team of legal experts and engaged residents, Ethan worked diligently to draft comprehensive guidelines aimed at promoting transparency and accountability within the HOA framework. The new laws included strict regulations regarding financial oversight, requiring regular audits and public disclosures of all expenditures. They also established clear protocols for addressing violations to ensure fair treatment for all homeowners, eliminating the selective enforcement that had plagued the previous regime. As these new laws took shape, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that these measures would serve as a safeguard against corruption, empowering residents to hold their leaders accountable. With every provision written into the legislation, he envisioned a future where homeowners could engage with their association without fear of retribution. When the new fraud prevention laws were officially adopted by the HOA, it symbolized not only a victory for Ethan, but also a collective triumph for the entire Maple Ridge community. Homeowners celebrated this achievement as a critical step toward restoring trust and integrity in their neighborhood governance. Ethan's contributions solidified his legacy as a community leader, one who had transformed personal adversity into meaningful change. He became a role model for residents aspiring to advocate for justice and fairness within their own neighborhoods. The journey from victim to champion underscored his belief that empowered communities could rise above challenges and create environments where all voices are heard and respected. In doing so, Ethan not only protected Maple Ridge from future corruption, but also inspired neighboring communities to take similar initiatives, spreading the message that vigilance and unity are key to safeguarding democracy at any level. His fight against injustice had truly sparked a movement toward better governance and community empowerment across the region. Ethan Carter's journey from a targeted homeowner to a champion of justice serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the strength of community action against corruption. What began as a personal battle against the Maple Ridge HOA, led by the ruthless Samantha Langford, transformed into a collective movement for accountability and integrity. Initially, Ethan had faced a barrage of attacks, his privacy hedges destroyed, a hefty fine imposed, and relentless intimidation tactics aimed at silencing him. But instead of succumbing to fear, he chose to fight back. Armed with access to 5 years of financial records, he meticulously uncovered a web of corruption that not only implicated Samantha, but also revealed how deeply entrenched abuses of power had become in their community. Ethan's courage in exposing these injustices ignited a spark among fellow homeowners who rallied around him in solidarity. Together, they demanded change, forcing a forensic audit that unveiled over $400,000 in misappropriated funds. The revelation of these financial discrepancies galvanized the community, leading to legal actions against Samantha and her board members. Their arrests marked a pivotal victory for Ethan and Maple Ridge, a victory that would ripple through the entire neighborhood. As the dust settled, Ethan took on an essential role in rebuilding trust within the HOA. He advocated for transparency and fairness, helping draft new fraud prevention laws that would protect residents from future abuses. His efforts not only restored integrity to their community governance, but also empowered residents to participate actively in decision-making processes. The transformation of Maple Ridge was profound. Unfair fines were refunded, corrupt policies were reversed, and an atmosphere of collaboration replaced the fear that had once dominated their lives. Ethan's journey illustrated how one individual's resolve could catalyze meaningful change when supported by a united community. In this way, Ethan emerged not just as a whistleblower, but as a beacon of hope and resilience. His story exemplified the profound impact that courage and collective action can have in challenging corruption. Through his determination and leadership, he reinforced the idea that communities could rise above adversity when they stand together. Ultimately, Ethan's legacy is one of empowerment. He demonstrated that when individuals refuse to be silenced and communities come together to demand justice, they can create lasting change. The Maple Ridge neighborhood flourished under this new ethos, ensuring that no resident would ever again suffer under tyranny or oppression. Ethan Carter's fight was more than personal. It was a rallying cry for justice that would inspire others well beyond Maple Ridge.